I never thought the people who raised me, the ones I supported for 3 years with $2,000 a month, would be the ones to betray me the hardest. But this Christmas, after I sacrificed my time, money, and energy to keep them afloat, my own parents kicked me out of the house. And the reason? Because I wasn't giving them enough. Let me back up. I'm 34 years old and I worked my way up in medical device sales, one of the most competitive industries out there. First year? Oh. I was broke, sleeping in my car, showering at a Planet Fitness, trying to convince hospitals to take a chance on me. But I grinded. No safety net, no backup plan, just me working my ass off. And after years of long hours, no vacations, and building my reputation, I finally made it big. 6 figures, my own house, financial freedom. Then 2020 hit and my parents' business collapsed. They had run a successful antique restoration shop, but when the economy took a hit, so did they. The way they told it, they were drowning in debt, struggling just to keep the lights on. And I did what any son would do, I helped. Started sending them $2,000 a month, every single month, to keep them afloat. I thought I was saving them. At first, they were grateful. My mom would cry on the phone, my dad would tell me how proud he was. But over time, something changed. The gratitude faded, replaced by expectation. The thank yous got shorter. Instead of, wow, you're a lifesaver, it became, the money's a little late this month. Then came the hints, the house needs repairs, the car is breaking down, and oh, Jake needs some help. Jake. My 31-year-old brother. The family golden child. No job, no ambition, just a basement gamer with a Twitch channel that made about as much money as a lemonade stand in winter. But somehow in my parents' eyes, I was the one who had it easy. For 3 years I kept paying. $72,000 in total. That's more than a down payment on a house, but I figured they're family, right? Until Christmas. I walk into my childhood home, excited to see them, gifts in hand, including a brand new $1,800 OLED TV I bought for them. And before dinner's even served, my father clears his throat and says, "Son, we need to talk about your financial support." Then my mom chimes in with the real bombshell. Given the current situation, we think it's only fair to increase your monthly contribution to $4,000. And then Jake, the freeloading Twitch streamer, has the nerve to smirk at me and say, "Not everyone sells out for a corporate job. Some of us are trying to build something real." That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment I realized the truth. They weren't struggling. They were using me. And after that night, I decided, if they wanted a lesson in financial survival, I'd be happy to teach them. That Christmas dinner was the moment everything clicked for me. The years of guilt tripping, the way my parents always favored Jake, the subtle hints that I needed to do more, it all came together in one horrifying realization. I wasn't their son. I was their ATM. Let's rewind a bit. Growing up, Jake was always the favorite. The creative dreamer. The one my parents babied while I was the responsible one. If Jake failed a class, not his fault. If Jake needed money, just ask Ryan, he's got a stable job. If Jake dropped out of community college because it was too hard, he just needs time to find his passion. And apparently, his passion was sitting in the basement playing video games and waiting for his next handout. Meanwhile, I was grinding. First job? Minimum wage at a grocery store just to save up for college. I worked my ass off, got into sales, and built myself up from literally nothing. Every penny I had was earned, not handed to me. But here's the real kicker. While I was paying them $2,000 a month, Jake was doing just fine. Not once did he get a job, help with the bills, or even act like he appreciated the free rent my parents gave him. Instead, he spent his days streaming Fortnite to 12 viewers and posting Instagram stories about the grind while living off my money. And I was dumb enough to let it happen. Looking back, the red flags were everywhere. And my mom would constantly mention how proud she was of Jake's entrepreneurial spirit, while conveniently never mentioning his actual income. And my dad would talk about how hard the economy was and how some families have to pull together, as if I wasn't already sending them $24,000 a year. Jake himself started dropping passive-aggressive hints in our family group chat about how I was so lucky to have a corporate job while some people were actually building something meaningful. Dude, you are 31 years old playing video games in a basement. Sit down. But here's where it gets worse. As I sat at that Christmas dinner table, still processing my father's demand for $4,000 a month, something felt off. My parents' house looked better than ever. The furniture? No. Jake's streaming setup? Upgraded. The whole place was covered in fancy RGB lighting, new electronics, and fresh appliances. And then out of nowhere, my mom, my own mother, dropped this gem. Ryan, you're lucky you don't have kids yet. You don't have real responsibilities. As if paying their bills wasn't responsibility enough. Then Jake, still chewing on his mashed potatoes, smirked and said, "Must be nice having all that extra cash while your family struggles." That was it. Something snapped in me. For 3 years, I had sacrificed vacations, delayed buying a house, skipped out on personal luxuries, all while thinking I was helping my struggling parents. But now I was realizing the truth. They weren't struggling. They had been lying to me. And if they thought I was going to keep funding their lifestyle while Jake sat on his ass pretending to be an influencer, they had another thing coming. I forced a smile, nodded, and said, "You know what? You're right. Families should support each other. I'll think about it." And that was the last check they ever got from me. Because what happened next? I exposed everything. The night after that Christmas disaster, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing. Something didn't add up. My parents had lost their business, right? They were struggling, right? That's why I had been sending them $2,000 a month, right? So why did their house look better than ever? Why was Jake living comfortably with brand new gaming gear? I needed answers. So I did what I do best. I started digging. First call? Mike Peterson. Mike is a real estate agent I knew from high school. Good guy, great at his job. He's the type of guy who knows everything about who's buying what in the city. "Hey Mike, weird question," I said, trying to sound casual. "My parents own that antique shop on Oak Street. Any idea what happened to it?" Mike didn't even hesitate. "Oh yeah, they sold that place months ago. Made a killing too." My heart stopped. They sold their business? What do you mean made a killing? I asked. Mike hesitated, then said, let's just say they won't be worrying about bills for a long time." I nearly dropped the phone. They sold the business. They weren't struggling. They had been lying to me. And I had been paying them $2,000 a month while they went on shopping sprees. Next, I checked Jake's Amazon purchase history. Oh yeah, he leaves reviews. $300 microphone? Bought right after my July transfer. $400 gaming chair? Ordered 2 weeks after my August transfer. $1,200 streaming camera? Paid for the day after my September transfer. I was funding his entire streaming career. Then came the final nail in the coffin. A text from my cousin Sarah, who works at a real estate office. "Hey Ryan, I saw your parents looking at Florida vacation homes. Are they moving?" Florida vacation homes. While I had been skipping vacations to afford their bills, they had been house hunting. I saw red. That night, I went over to my parents' house unannounced. When I walked in, my $1,800 OLED TV was on, playing, you guessed it, Jake's Twitch stream. My mom looked up, startled. "Ryan, what are you doing here?" I dropped a thick manila envelope on the coffee table. "We need to talk." Jake, still reclining on the couch, muttered, "Bro, you're making this weird." I stared him dead in the eyes. "No. What's weird is you living off my money, while pretending to be an entrepreneur." Then I turned to my parents. "I know about the business. I know about the Florida houses. I know about every single lie you've told me." The room went silent. And in that moment I saw it. They knew they were caught. And I was about to end their entire scam. The silence in the room was suffocating. My parents looked stunned, their faces shifting from shock to something close to panic. Jake, still lounging on the couch, had that smug smirk he always wore when he thought he could talk his way out of trouble. "Look bro, I don't know what you think you found, but..." I cut him off. "Shut up, Jake." His mouth snapped shut. I turned to my father, who was gripping the armrest of his recliner so tightly his knuckles were white. "So when exactly were you planning to tell me? Before or after you bought a vacation home in Florida?" My mom let out a nervous laugh, the same one she used when she was trying to manipulate me into doing something. "Ryan, sweetheart, you're misunderstanding. No, I snapped, my voice cold. I understand perfectly. You sold the business. You made a profit. You didn't need my money. You just chose to keep taking it. I pointed at Jake, who was suddenly looking very uncomfortable. And you used it to fund his fake influencer career. Mom's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Dad, always the quieter one, rubbed his temples like he had a headache. Son, this isn't how family works. Families help each other. Help? I let out a bitter laugh. I sent you $72,000 because you told me you were struggling. I yanked a paper out of my folder and slapped it onto the coffee table. Here. August 14th. You called me crying about overdue bills. Meanwhile, that same day, Jake ordered a $1,200 camera and a $400 gaming chair. I turned to my brother. Tell me, Jake, what kind of business investment requires a neon gaming chair? Jake shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between our parents. Look, man, that's just how it works, okay? Streaming is competitive. You gotta look professional. You barely have 10 viewers. His face flushed red. Mom tried again. Ryan, you've done so well for yourself. Is it so wrong that we wanted to see Jake succeed? Duh. He's trying. Oh, is he? I pulled up my phone and played a recording from one of Jake's streams, one I had saved after my Christmas revelation. Yeah, man, my brother's a corporate sellout. Dude thinks he's better than everyone just 'cause he works a boring-ass job. I'd rather be broke than be like him. The audio filled the room. My parents paled. Jake's face went ghost white. Dad exhaled sharply. Jake, did you really say that? Jake swallowed. I mean, that was just content, you know? Gotta play it up for the audience. I shook my head. Audience? You mean the 12 people who watch you? I turned back to my parents. This is who you chose to support. The son who trashed me while taking my money. Jake stood up suddenly, trying to save face. You don't get it, Ryan. You never did. You've always been selfish, hoarding money while the rest of us struggled. You don't even have a wife or kids. What are you even saving for? I blinked. I don't know, maybe for my own future, since I assumed you two had wasted your retirement. I turned back to my parents. But turns out I didn't need to, because you were never struggling. You just lied. The weight of my words sank in. For the first time, I saw real guilt on my father's face. My mother, however, was still trying to manipulate the situation. Ryan, honey, let's not do this. Let's sit down and talk. We can work something out. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Here's what's going to happen. I pulled out my last set of papers and slapped them onto the coffee table. 1. I stopped all financial support immediately. No more monthly checks. No more emergency transfers. Nothing. 2. I had already alerted my bank to flag any suspicious activity related to my accounts. Any attempt to guilt trip me into sending more money? I would publicly expose everything. 3. I was cutting all contact with Jake. He was dead to me. And if you even think about trying to guilt me into fixing the mess you created, I added, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of parents you are. Silence. Then my dad sighed. Long and deep, like he had finally run out of excuses. You're serious? I stared at him, unblinking. Dead serious. Jake scoffed. Oh, come on, man, you're not actually gonna cut us off. I turned on my heel and walked out. Mom called after me, but I didn't stop. Jake shouted, Bro, don't be a dick. I slammed the door behind me. And just like that, I was free. For the first time in years, I felt weightless. No more monthly transfers. No more forced Sunday phone calls. No more guilt. But here's the best part. Jake and my parents fell apart almost instantly. Within a month, I started getting messages from relatives. Apparently, my parents had been counting on my money to finance their retirement, which, shockingly, wasn't as secure as they had led me to believe. Without my support, they started drowning in credit card debt. Jake had to sell his precious gaming setup, piece by piece, to pay for basic living expenses. The $1,200 camera? Gone. The $400 gaming chair? Sold for half its price. His dream of being an influencer? Dead. Then came the real blow. Turns out they hadn't just been window shopping for Florida properties. They had already put down deposits. When they couldn't secure the mortgage because, surprise, lying to your son isn't a sustainable business model, they lost their down payments. A few months later, I got a call from an unknown number. I knew exactly who it was before I picked up. Ryan. My mom's voice was small. We need to talk. I didn't say anything. She sniffled. Jake's really struggling. He had to move in with a friend. And your father and we might lose the house. I stayed silent. She continued, voice shaky. If you could just help us out for a few months, just until we get back on our feet. I let her sit in the silence. Then, with the calmest voice I could muster, I said, new phone. Who this? And then I hung up. That was the last time I ever spoke to them. Jake is now working at a GameStop, barely making ends meet. My parents had to sell their home and downsize into a small apartment. Meanwhile, I finally bought my own house, my own car, took my first real vacation in years. And the best part? I never sent them another cent. Because in the end, the real revenge wasn't just cutting them off. It was letting them finally experience what struggling really felt like. After cutting them off, I expected some fallout, but I underestimated just how quickly their world would collapse. Within a month, the cracks in their so-called retirement plan started showing. I didn't just stop sending money, I also stopped responding to their calls, texts, guilt-tripping emails, and worst of all for them, I stopped playing their game. It started with Jake. With no more Ryan's monthly donations funding his streaming career, he quickly realized that being an influencer actually costs money he didn't have. The Amazon packages stopped. The RGB lights? Turned off. The brand new microphone? Listed on eBay within 2 weeks. I wasn't even surprised. One of my cousins sent me a screenshot of Jake's Instagram story. It was a sob post about how people always let you down, even your own blood. I laughed when I saw it. The same guy who spent years calling me a sellout and a corporate drone was now crying online because his personal ATM had shut down. My parents weren't doing much better. Turns out they had been counting on my money to cover their mortgage, bills, and whatever lifestyle Jake was trying to pull off. The whole "we're retired" act was just that. And without my money, the credit card debt started stacking up fast. About 6 weeks in, I got a text from Mom. Ryan, honey, we need to talk. Please. It's important. I left her on read. Then, about 2 months later, I ran into Mike, the real estate guy, at the gym. Dude, he said, shaking his head. Your parents were trying to sell their house. I raised an eyebrow. What? Mike chuckled. Yeah, man. They reached out to my agency, asking about fast cash options. Said they were downsizing. I knew what that meant. They were desperate. They had no idea how to manage their finances without my money. And because they had been lying to me for years, they had zero savings. But here's the best part. They never sold the house. What? Because my dad had refinanced it 3 years ago, probably thinking my money would cover the extra payments. Without my support, they were drowning. The 3rd month after I cut them off, I got a call from an unknown number. I picked up out of curiosity. Mom. She sounded tired, defeated. Ryan, she said, her voice cracking. We're in trouble. I leaned back in my chair, smirking. Oh. She took a shaky breath. Your father, he's not doing well. The stress has been too much. I said, not buying it. What do you want, Mom? Pause. Then, we need help. I let the silence sit. She rushed to fill it. Just a little, Ryan. Not like before, just enough to. No, she choked on whatever excuse she was about to throw at me. No, she repeated like she couldn't believe I would refuse. I didn't budge. No. You lied to me for 3 years. You took $72,000 from me while pretending to be broke. You don't get to ask for my help. She sniffled. Ryan, honey, we're your family. I hung up. That was the last time I answered her calls. Jake, meanwhile, had gone radio silent. I wasn't stupid. I knew he was trying to come up with some scheme to get back on his feet. And boy, did he try. A few weeks later, I got a LinkedIn notification. Jake had rebranded himself as a business and financial coach. I actually laughed out loud. This was the same guy who burned through my money like it was Monopoly cash, and now he was trying to tell people how to build wealth? Then my best friend Mike sent me a link. Jake had started posting TikToks about financial freedom. The irony was so thick it could choke someone. I didn't think about them much after that. Life was peaceful without their nonsense. Until I got an email from my mother. The subject line? Please, Ryan. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. The email was a masterpiece of desperation. She admitted they had maxed out their credit cards. The Florida house deal fell through. The mortgage payments were overdue. And worst of all, Jake was moving back in with them, after getting fired from GameStop for conflict with customers. Translation? He probably mouthed off to the wrong person and got himself canned. The email ended with an offer. If I agreed to help them, they would put me in their will. I stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted the email without responding. I had already won. A few weeks later, I ran into my cousin David at a bar. He sat down next to me, shaking his head with a grin. Dude, he said, sipping his beer. Your parents and Jake? They're screwed. I raised an eyebrow. Oh. David smirked. They had to sell all of Jake's equipment just to keep the lights on. And get this, your mom tried selling the TV you bought them. For Christmas. I nearly spat out my drink. You're kidding. He pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot from Facebook Marketplace. Like new, barely used 6.5 OLED TV, $2,000 OBO. I burst out laughing. The same TV they mocked me for bringing? The one that was supposed to be for the whole family? They were desperate. And it was glorious. Jake tried one last stunt. A week after that, I got a text from a new number. Bro, let's talk. I need help. I replied with one sentence. New phone. Who this? Then I blocked the number. And with that, I closed the book on them forever. I moved on. Got a promotion, bought a better house, took a real vacation for the first time in years. My parents and Jake? They lost everything. They thought they could guilt and manipulate me forever. They never expected me to walk away. But I did. And that was the best revenge of all. When I cut them off, I thought that would be the end of it. But no, they weren't done with me yet. 2 weeks after the confrontation, I started getting texts from unknown numbers, long-winded messages. About family, about forgiveness, about how I was throwing everything away over a simple misunderstanding. At first, I ignored them. Then came the voicemails, mom crying, dad's voice tight with anger, Jake rambling about how I was ruining his future over something so small. I blocked every number. Then the email started. The first few were classic guilt trips. You owe us after everything we've done for you. How can you abandon your family like this? You're going to regret this when we're gone. Then came the bargaining. If you just help with a few payments, we'll let you have a say in things. We're willing to talk about new terms. Jake's really struggling. You wouldn't let your brother suffer, would you? I didn't respond. That's when they got desperate. One night, I got a call from an old family friend, someone who had always been close to my parents. Hey, I just got a weird message from your mom. She says they're about to lose their house? That they might be homeless. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was just so predictable. No, I said. They're not losing their house. They just lost their ATM. The next day, I started getting calls from relatives, distant cousins, aunts I hadn't spoken to in years, each one with some variation of, they're saying you just abandoned them? That they're in serious financial trouble? I laid out the truth. Sent receipts, forwarded emails, showed them exactly where my money had gone. Most of them went quiet. A few apologized for ever doubting me. And then, just when I thought they couldn't sink any lower, they actually tried to sue me. Yep. My own parents. I got served papers one morning before work, an official demand for unpaid family support. Their argument? That I had promised to provide for them indefinitely and was now failing in my duty. I laughed when I read it. Not out of amusement, but because I genuinely couldn't believe how delusional they had become. I sent the case straight to my lawyer, who practically cackled when he saw the papers. This won't even make it past the first hearing, he said. They have no legal grounds. A verbal agreement, if there even was one, doesn't mean they can force you to keep paying. And he was right. It was thrown out almost immediately. But here's the best part. Filing that lawsuit exposed them. See, when you make a legal claim, your finances get looked at. My lawyer dug into their records, and guess what? Turns out they weren't just mismanaging my money. They were deep in credit card debt, had multiple loans under false pretenses, and had even taken out a second mortgage on their house. The court dismissed their case against me, but the investigation into their financial fraud had already started. And once it did, everything unraveled. Their creditors came hard. Suddenly, those lavish Amazon purchases, that new BMW, those shady property viewings in Florida, they all caught up with them. The banks froze their accounts, debt collectors started knocking, and within 3 months they were drowning. Dad lost the car. Jake had to sell off his entire streaming setup. His mic, his gaming chair, even his entrepreneurial camera. He started looking for real jobs, but funny thing, turns out when you spend your whole life avoiding work, nobody really wants to hire you. Then came the final act. A month later, I got one last email from my mom, and this one was different. It wasn't angry. It wasn't manipulative. It was begging. Ryan, we've lost everything. Your father and I are struggling to even buy groceries. Jake, well, he's trying, but things are hard. We made mistakes. We know that now. Please, if there's any way you can help us, just a little, we won't ask for anything more. I stared at that email for a long time. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt something. Not guilt, not sympathy, but finality. This was it. The moment they realized I was truly gone. I didn't respond. I didn't even open the email again. I marked it as spam and deleted it. That was 6 months ago. Since then, my life has never been better. My savings are climbing again. I finally bought the house I wanted, without anyone guilting me into sharing. I've traveled. I've reconnected with friends. And most importantly, I'm free. As for my family, well, last I heard, my parents had to sell their house. Turns out it was too expensive for them once they lost my contributions. They downsized to a small apartment, barely scraping by. And Jake? Oh, Jake's still Jake. He tried to rebrand himself as a financial coach on TikTok, giving advice about how to build wealth. The irony was so thick I almost choked when I saw it. But I didn't comment. I didn't engage. Because they don't exist to me anymore. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it. If I feel bad for abandoning my own blood. But the truth is they abandoned me first. They saw me as nothing but a paycheck. A resource to be drained. A tool to fund their dreams while I put mine on hold. Cutting them off wasn't revenge. It was justice. And honestly, was the best decision I've ever made.